Does anybody remember Gate? You know, that anime where it's talking about the kind of super gray area between war and oppression that is dealt with on the sides of all the refugees? No? Maybe I'm a little bit weird referencing. Is it too late to do a video on this? Start season 3 on the horizon for summer 2017? I don't know, but I wanted to do this, so we're doing it. Let's talk about Gate. So, Gate. What is it exactly? Well, it's basically an anime that talks about the exploits of the JSDF, which is the Japanese Defense Force. But I'm going to be calling them JSDF for short because holy fuck, that's a long name. However, what this basically talks about is an invasion that starts from another dimension, coming into the current Japanese universe, world, country, whatever, and basically launching a full-out strike against them. And naturally, being radicalized by this event, the Japanese government decides to send in their own troops to, first of all, discover where and why this all started, and also what exactly they could get from this special region that they've designated this area. And that is essentially what this anime is about. However, I'm not necessarily interested in the waifus or the interesting sort of idea that plays with. I'm more interested in the grayness, the gray area that's played with in this actual world, because it does have some real world reflections and repercussions. Breaking it down for you guys, Japan really doesn't like war. Like, they don't support it in the populace. This is why it's so interesting, because the JSDF, the Japanese Defense Force, going in and into this special area and essentially waging a very one-sided war, by the way, demonstrates an idealized world where Japan is forced to go to war to defend itself from invaders who attack from a gate, hence the name. That being said, they don't show the attackers through the lens of some faceless enemy that they have to defeat. No, this is an anime that decides to take the high road and actually demonstrate them as humanized individuals, or I guess elf-ized anyway, point being this. They take this whole narrative of the typical us versus them idea and say it's an us versus us. That being said, they show the JSDF taking actions that essentially allow you to rationalize and identify with the refugees that they essentially have created, and as well as you kind of learn the political narrative on both sides of the fence, where it's from a corrupt king who is forcing his subjects and also the royal army and armies of people that are political enemies of his to go to war and incidentally be slaughtered by the JSDF and their clearly superior weapons. So that begs the question, who is the better character, the better force, the hero of the film, of the anime? And to be honest, there's not a real clear-cut answer. Now, obviously, we're being shown from the overall perspective of JSDF officers in the show, but here's the thing. They never really give any clear reasons for why a lot of this is happening. And obviously, there is, on a human level, reason to empathize with the people that we're attacking. He's an otaku, the main character, so he kind of understands the whole appeal of elf girls, lolitas, all this other crazy shit that ends up coming to fruition in this special region that they go to. So we have an empathizing antagonist almost, who goes and essentially decimates their world. Obviously in response to something, but still. And this is kind of the thing that I wanted to focus on. The fact that the anime doesn't really paint one guy or one force as the good guy overall is what's really interesting. They deal with a moral gray area, which is, if you look at war from an objective point of view, is genuinely what happens. There is no good guy, there is no bad guy, there is a reason they're attacking and a reason they're defending. Or a reason the other side returns attack and the other person defends from this counter-strike. Now, that said, there's reasons on both sides to have these motivations, but here's the thing. When you apply the idea of just war theory, which if you summarize it, it essentially means that they have to have a justified reason to go to war and a very humanized and civilized way of treating any sort of prisoners, any sort of refugees, and generally the people that they're actually fighting, which includes giving them time to actually collect their wounded, time to rehabilitate and build structures for those who are refugees due to the fighting that doesn't in fact ensue. And that is basically what this whole thing focuses on, is the rehabilitation of our main cast of female badasses. And of course that one old creepy pervert dude who, he's just sort of in there for the laughs, I guess, kinda. But also, you know, magic training. So how does this translate to the real world? Well, if we look at war propaganda from even just the perspective of the US for a lot of the wars that they've been in recently, we actually look at the fact that the Iraq War was started for a couple of different reasons, whether it was for the fact that the dinar, the gold dinar that was being developed, would essentially invalidate the US currency in that country, or the fact that there was oil. But from the perspective of the US, it was a counter-strike to terrorism that had occurred previously, that being 9/11. So if you look at it from an objective perspective, you realize that there are necessarily things that have been shaded to look a certain way to radicalize a group of individuals towards a certain idea. Now, if you look at the measured counter-strike of the US, you realize that a lot of the actions are kind of way out of proportion. It's essentially being pricked as a lion and then stomping on said bee and decimating it and rubbing it into the ground. It's way just out there, but it's still a reaction. Anyway, aside from the whole freedom thing, and I know that's probably going to get me a ton of hate from the US, but understand me this. It really depends who is in actual power and office in the US, and that kind of dictates how the wars or the attacks and different things are covered. Depending if it's a Republican, a Democrat, someone who can further corporate interests, or someone who can further interests of the country as a whole, whether it is economic prosperity, prosperity of certain individuals, certain sectors, it all has an influence, and that is all given a lens through the media. So that's called controlling the narrative. This is actually demonstrated in Gate, going back to the original topic. It's demonstrated very clearly when Japan, who obviously is incredibly anti-war, just like the US has recently become very much anti-war, which I am so about, to be honest with you. I love that. But Gate, Japan is already, they're historically against war. So one of the things that comes up is the fact that they say 20% of the refugees from a village, which are then attacked by a fire dragon, are killed, and they want to hold the JSDF responsible. However, Rory counters by saying, well, that inherently means that 80% of refugees were saved. Obviously, soldiers aren't going to necessarily want to put themselves in unnecessary amounts of harm's way, even if it might have a positive effect in the long run. There is a level of battle preservation in mind. So it's really interesting to see the way that Gate handles these sort of issues. It's definitely an anime that doesn't shy away from the idea of corporatism, power struggles, and the idea that there is a just way to have warfare, but there is also the fact that no matter how just warfare might seem, there is always going to be some sort of fallout. Whether in Gate it is the refugees, that is Rory Mercury, and the other characters, which I really should remember the names of, but I just don't. And the fact that the princess, her dad, who is the corrupt king, and all these people are essentially being thrown into a war that doesn't necessarily need to happen. It's a very interesting multi-layered sort of structure, and I just have a lot of appreciation for that. This is just a beautiful demonstration of the complex stories that can be expressed in anime. It's not necessarily all fan service, it's not necessarily all slice of life, and while there's definitely a place for those, there is definitely a keen appreciation for a complex multi-layered story that can be had for anime, and I personally am the type who enjoys that sort of anime, so if you guys have any suggestions for that sort of thing, let me know in the comments down below, and I will definitely try to get to watching some of it so I can do more theories on that. For example, Mirai Nikki would be a really cool example of that. However, guys, I hope you enjoyed this kind of shallow dive into the nature of Gate, the political ramifications, the war ramifications, how that kind of strings into the real world, things like that, and just kind of all kinds of crazy shit. There's way more that we can unpack, but it's going to take a whole nother episode. Anyway, guys, with that said, I think the Japanese political idealism might get me age restricted. But anyway, I think it was a really cool topic that I just had to get into. It was really kind of an awesome anime with a lot of depth and levels to it. So with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Splice Knight. If you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to this channel, like this video so that it's consistently in your news feed. And as always, thanks for watching. If you guys want to stay up to date, make sure that you see every single video that I put out, and it is very different content every single time, so that might be something you're interested in. If you want to do that, you can follow my Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Splice Knight on all of those forums. Or as always, you can subscribe to this channel if you are interested and hit that notification bell. That said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more content, as I said, videos in the sidebar. But that's all. Splice Knight out.